affected me quite personally, quite deeply, and I've gone through quite a difficult, dark time, and I've come out of it on the other side. Mental health cripples queer people. It's just a case of sharing my experience. So if others are experiencing something as horrid as going through severe depression, then they know that they can come out of it. One, that there is hope. Two, life can return back to normal. And what are the various ways by which you can actually make it come back to normal?
Hi, my queer family. I'm Javier Lopez. Hope you're all safe and sound. Today, we will be discussing mental health with Adi. Adi is originally from India but now lives in the UK with his partner. We will talk about his experience coming out to his family and how this affected his mental health. We'll talk about sort of before and after Adi decided he needed professional support. This all came at a cost, of course, the cost of being vulnerable and pouring your heart out to others, and now to you, to listen, learn, and inspire yourself, if you will, with his incredible journey of self-acceptance. So tell me, why did you want to talk specifically about mental health?
One, because very easily it's affected me. That's one of the biggest reasons. So it's affected me quite personally, quite deeply, and I've gone through quite a difficult, dark time, and I've come out of it on the other side.
Mm-hmm.
And because I have come out of it on the other side, I'm able to look back at it
Right.
and objectively see, how I navigated through it, and also the extent to which I feel mental health cripples queer people. It really affects them, most, not more so than other people. That's incorrect, but I think a lot more that I see, queer people are affected by mental health, and I just think whatever I can do, I'd like to be able to share my experience so that if it does help other people, I don't know, to the extent to which, your podcast may have a reach. And then it's just a case of sharing my experience. So if others are experiencing something as horrid as going through severe depression, then they know that they can come out of it. One, that there is hope. Two, life can return back to normal. And what are the various ways by which you can actually make it come back to normal?
Yeah.
And yeah, the learning for me has been immense. I haven't stopped learning. I still find out new stuff about me. But I think if I can share those experiences with someone and help anyone, even if one person, then I think that's where change starts, right?
I mean, yeah, of course, I totally agree with you. I have to say, in my particular case, with the work that I'm doing right now, even if I help one person, then I know, my work is working, my actual job and my goal, I can reach that, even if it's just one person. So I love opening up and sharing my story with people. So I think that's a great way of, not physically, metaphorically opening that door so other people feel welcome to
Yeah.
also share theirs. You never know what common grounds you have had, because everybody might have similar situations, but the experience is different. So would you like to tell us a little bit more about your experience and how you navigated, those challenges, and how you came out on the other side stronger, and now being able to actually look back into that?
Yeah, no, definitely. I think uh, I will definitely share my story, but what you said really is true. Is you know, speaking about yourself opens up the doors for other people to then speak about themselves. And that's one of the biggest things that I've learned in my kind of journey, if I can call it. And I mean, I probably think that there were elements of me feeling, traumatized or depressed as I was growing up, because I come from a very conservative society and family. But when it actually hit its peak, when I actually, had the sense to get myself diagnosed, was back in 2015. And then in 2017, I got myself a proper diagnosis. And that's when I was, diagnosed with acute anxiety and acute depression. So if on a scale they could be on the highest levels, I was high on both. So I was literally like out of the loop.
Okay.
Um, so it was very tough. That was the time back in 2017 that I was actually coming out to the world, not to myself. I had done that with myself, but coming out to the world, and I had just entered this relationship with my current partner. I was just understanding what it is to actually fall in love. Um, it just completely messed up my head. That was one part of it, which was obviously a significant component. And then, like, falling in love, but then coming out, just it was very daunting, like to
Mm-hmm.
be able to sort of confront everyone with it. And then the biggest fear, that's why I kind of, when I sent you that note, everything weaves into it, right? And my biggest sort of trigger for the acute anxiety was the lack of security. The complete, like, I just thought that this is it.
For security with your surroundings and
Yeah, like a sense of stability, right? So, as I said, so I couldn't have come out to my parents because I know how conservative that environment is. So knowing that, and somewhere deep down, a child clocks it. Like, so I clocked it when I was a young child that I would be never be able to confide into my mother or my dad, my dad I never could, but with my mother. So at that time, at 27, when I was like, oh, I need to now come out to the world. Bloody hell. Do I need to tell my mom and dad? If I have to tell my mom and dad, that's it. Like, that security net that I have always thought, assumed in my head that I've always had, will no longer exist.
yeah.
What? So it was at that cusp where, I was constantly, I was always said that, Addy, you're so driven. That's going to be the end of your mental health. You're constantly so ambitious. And then I think in that depression phase, and as I started my therapy and slowly I started to realize the ambition was purely to reach a sense of stability where I could be independent of my mom and dad and be my own person.
Exactly.
Um, it's, and they say that with feminism as well, which is so true. Like, economic independence is the first form of independence. And it sounds really harsh that, oh, is money everything? But you have to be able to, live. So I just thought that all of that independence, economic, emotional, was linked. And I just wasn't that without my parents. Like, I was just trained to think that I'm actually, or conditioned to think that
That you
uh,
actually needed them to actually continue and be yourself. You were
yeah,
dependent on that.
exactly. That my existence was contingent on the validation of my parents, of them being in my life. So that was a very difficult phase for me. Actually, no, now I need to stand on my own 2 feet. I mean, truly on my own 2 feet. Like, everyone says, yes, you're independent. I was doing a job, I was earning money, but at the same time, those kind of like true independence wasn't there. Like, I wasn't fully out of their clutches, if I can say that. And I think that understanding depression and understanding my kind of acute state, I got myself to a place where I mean, it took me 3 years to be able to, you know, to be able to have my own agency
Mm-hmm.
without kind of constantly feeling the responsibility of my mom's life and the responsibility of my dad's life. So these are the kind of really heavy things that was always on my shoulders,
Yeah.
which is what led to, I've been carrying it, which is what led to that kind of sudden peak in 2017 when I was like, right, if I come out, then I've kind of taken that responsibility, thrown it out, and I'm like, Mom, okay, if after this, if you take your life, God knows what's going to happen, like those kind of things. So it's like a lot of responsibility that was almost, I felt like I was being crushed under the burden of, which is what led to that kind of peak at
Yeah.
2017. I was like, everything's just going to end. And then the biggest factor was like, I was still Indian, I wasn't British yet, and I was like, if I need to go back to India for some reason, if I lose my job, that's it. Then I don't have anywhere to go. If
Yeah.
I lose my job, I don't have anywhere to go. I can't now return to India because I've just realized that I want to be out to the world. How will I live in a country? So, all of these, so many things basically. I mean,
It's like, it's like a lot happened in a short period of time and you were not prepared, obviously. I mean, nobody would be prepared for that. Sorry, continue.
No, no, that's it. That's exactly it. Because at that time, and I'm usually quite methodical, and drew a little, like a PowerPoint, like a Venn diagram, 5 things that have affected my life, and literally I've made like 5 circles intersecting each other, and I showed it to my current partner, and I still ask him, I'm like, why didn't you run away from me? Because he must have thought that this person's crazy. He's making diagrams for his life, and I was making little flow charts and little diagrams, and I was like, this is what's happening to me. These 5 things have affected me right now. No wonder I'm going a bit loopy. And and then he was like, no, because this is a lot. And yeah, we immediately then contacted. Thankfully, I'm privileged in that I have private healthcare, so I contacted Bupa, and I was like, listen, guys, something's messed up. So they did a triage, and then they did a triage. They're like, right, we need to. Don't think we need to put you through psychiatric right now, but we just definitely need you to start on therapy. So that's when it started. So you've very nicely summarized it. A lot of things just hit me at the same time, and it just led to me reaching that state.
That was in 2015 or in 2017?
This was 2017. 2015, I had a small bout of it. That's when I started realizing that something will happen to me. And at that time, I only shared it with my mom and my dad at the time. And they were quite supportive at the time, which gave me a lot of hope that one day when I come out, they will probably be supportive. But, if only hopes were true. But, that so 2017, I had a bout of about 3 to 4 months where I was really unwell. But the 2017 one lasted 2 years, like a year and a half, 2 years. So I was in therapy for 2 years, sorting myself out, and
Okay.
that's why I say only now have I come out of it.
And do you still talk to someone about your mental health, a professional that continues to guide you through this journey?
Um, I'm not on therapy at the moment, but every now and again, where I feel, but now I feel like I have the tools to recognize that there's something's off with my well-being. Like
Yeah.
even well-being as a word is part of my vocabulary now. It wasn't 3 years ago.
Mm.
Like, and this is why I think this topic is important, because no one talks about well-being. It's just like, a lot of people from, at least I can say from the East, they're like, what are you talking about? Have a cup of tea and that's well-being. And, and
Yeah.
it's like, no, there's a lot more that happens. And so I think, yeah, I don't, I'm not speaking to a professional right now, but I know that's always an option should things get really bad. So it is an available option for me. I have my partner to speak to, who I couldn't speak to back in 2017 because we had only just, begun being together.
Yeah.
And also, I think he was going through, again, he had his own kind of mental health issues at the time. So it was like a perfect storm in a teacup. Like both of us are going absolutely loopy together. But yeah, I do have him. I do have my best friend, who's actually my ex-partner, my ex-relationship, which is really complicated. I did have a relationship when I had not come out, when I was really young. I still, I never knew what to call that whatever I had, but only now, because I was comfortable with myself, I can actually call him my ex-partner. So
Right.
that even led to extreme kind of, I would say, guilt in me, which was the sixth component, if you can call it, which led to my 2017 peak. So anyway, that's a separate story. So I've got him, my ex-partner, my best friend, my current partner, and friends to speak to. So I'm quite open about my well-being now. So I do have people, but not professionally at the moment.
That is good, and that is key, feeling comfortable and having that courage, if you will, to actually reach out to others and ask for help. You mentioned earlier that you now can recognize those moments when you know that you need help. Could you tell us a little bit more about those little things that you recognize that other people might be able to recognize as well and know how to find them and then ask for that help?
Yeah, I think I think for me, it's key to recognize triggers. And it sounds probably very basic, but I feel like fatigue is a big trigger. So when I'm actually tired, like I first didn't even consider fatigue to be an actual thing. This is, I think, a part of my growing up conditioning. And again, a kind of a curse of coming from the East. It's like, what does being tired mean? You're not tired, just get on with your life and do your work, right? But and it's just I never knew that being tired could be a thing. I could allow myself the luxury of saying that I'm tired. So I think for me, that is one of my biggest learnings, that when I'm actually tired, I can't think straight anyway. So when people used to say sleep over it never made sense to me. But now when I know that, like somehow I'm getting the message from my brain or my heart, I don't know which, that you need some rest, I want to listen to it instead of uh, you know, previously, even if something would annoy me, I would, just, I journal a lot. So I would open my journal, keep writing my thoughts, and like now I give myself a little break. So fatigue is a big trigger for me. Like I've learned how to recognize that I'm getting really tired. Um, the other thing for me is association. So things that I know will bring back um, either bad memories or negative thoughts. So I've almost made a log of those associations. So those associations for me are even speaking to a cousin, for example, from when I was growing up. Um, you know, they don't know much, but it's just from my side, it's like it's a part of self-care, right? I'm protecting myself. I know that actually speaking to them without any of their fault, a lot of the I may say that from my past will come
Mm-hmm.
uh, in front of me again. So I will then, instead of buckling under the pressure that, oh, I must speak to my cousin or I must speak to this person, I actually now actively not I recognize those as triggers. If someone wants to reach out to me and wants to have a chat with me, then I know that that will be uh, some form of a trigger. So I will, according to my own life and my plan, my convenience, figure out when to speak to them. So I think managing that has been quite useful. So managing negative associations preemptively has been quite useful um, for me. Um,
Yeah, I think listening and paying attention to what your body is telling you is very important. We were talking about fatigue, and so it's not that you might be just tired physically, you might be just tired mentally as well, and you don't know that. You just feel tired physically. And yeah, what you mentioned as well about talking to the right people is really important. You need to
yes,
recognize who you can trust and who you know that you can talk about your issues or what you're going through at that point, that you know is going to help you somehow and not just drag you down even more. So it is important, obviously, to recognize those things, and it works very different for everybody. But if anybody else might feel exactly the same way as you do, we don't know that. But we said at the beginning, or I said at the beginning, if we can only help at least one person, then that's my job done, and I hope it's your job done as well. So hopefully some people will, identify with the situations, and it will help them recognize those moments, and they will know better what to do. So thank you for that. Um, why do you think mental health is such a taboo, not just in the LGBTQIA plus community, but in general?
it's it's linked to I use the word being loopy, but it's linked to it's a stigma, right? So it's linked to weakness. It's linked to just something that doesn't exist. Like people don't understand it yet. So it's, even if you would share that you're not feeling well, immediately questions that are asked is, so what's happened?
Mm-hmm.
Mental health is not that easily explained as physical health is. So sometimes I feel like it's a combination of, one, it being a stigma, seen as a sign of weakness. Two, actually, even people going through it don't have the vocabulary or the articulation to actually say that something is off with them, because they themselves, or we ourselves as a society, are not educated enough about that. We're getting there, but I think that's what's causing it to be a taboo. Um, and yeah, I mean, anthropologically speaking, I think there are lots of things. I think patriarchy is a big problem as well. I think that's a big issue that is causing mental health to society. I still haven't investigated it enough to actually talk about it in with authority, but I do think one day I'll have the time to investigate how patriarchy has messed up the mental health of society in general. Um, I genuinely feel from like there's my gut tells me that there is a link, but I have like I'd like to do some research to find out. So, but that aside, the answers that I can definitely speak about are the fact that people don't understand that there's lack of education, and that's making it difficult to people to talk about it and share because they don't have the words, they don't have the vocabulary. And the other thing is, then the other side, the external world thinks of it as weakness at the moment as well.
Yeah, I think also something that I personally have gone through is probably there is a bit of shame in admitting that you have a problem. And then that's tied to the weakness that you were talking about. Nobody wants to feel weak and vulnerable. It is the hardest thing that you can do, be vulnerable. But once you open up like yourself, like what you're doing today and what you have learned to do with everybody else, you use it to empower yourself. And then you kind of use that as that fuel to push yourself through, you know? But it's having to make that decision to be vulnerable. After that, things are gonna be easier a little bit every day, but it's gonna be a really big and hard step to take because you're gonna feel weak, you're gonna feel vulnerable, and you're gonna feel ashamed. And that's, I mean, there is no way to ignore that or to go around it. You have to go through that. I always say I am a man of feelings and I like to experience them all. So I always tell people, what I think they should do, but obviously it's not up to me what people will do. But opening up is always a great way, as I said at the beginning when we started the conversation, is a way of opening that door for others. So it's like you empower each other by telling each other's story. There is so much, and there are so many things in common that you don't even know that the other person has, and you can help each other. So yeah, powering through that shame and that weakness is definitely going to pay off on the other side. So thank you for that. Um, now that you are on the other side, sorry.
Just build on the vulnerability aspect is, I mean, the amount of times that I had to actually train myself to exactly that point. Like, we all would have seen those TEDx talks about the power of vulnerability, and it really is true. It's bloody hard, like, to be vulnerable. Like, we're not trained, we're not wired, at least a lot of us are not wired to be vulnerable in the first place. I think in general, I would say that being gay gives me a bit of a privilege in being more expressive. I feel like I take that as a sense of pride. Like, I am able to be more expressive. But even then, like it's being vulnerable is such a scary place. It is so like, I remember being scared with my partner and like us and telling him that actually sometimes I feel really difficult in like asking for help. And that in that moment, like we had such a I can visualize it. I can hardly express it in words, but it's really scary, that feeling when you're actually telling someone exactly. But then, as you said, also what really resonated with me, that with time, then being vulnerable becomes easier. You just have to do it one time and then slowly it becomes easier. So I'm actually going to note that tonight in my journal, what you've just said, that, and just remind myself of the fact that it's important to remember that being vulnerable, you sometimes will forget about it. Sometimes, you're riding your own high, arrogant horse, then you forget about being vulnerable. But actually, then you have to remind yourself that actually it is not that difficult because you've done it.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I think society has done a great job in training you the wrong way, and feeding you these ideas that you cannot be weak, you cannot be vulnerable. Obviously, that's wrong. That's the opposite. That is not helping the person or the individual, So yeah, power through that feeling. It's gonna be hard to go through it, but you're gonna be better on the other side. And then, like we said a minute ago, it's just gonna get better from that point onwards. So yeah, um, you mentioned earlier that you are now, on the other side of this mental health journey, and you can actually look back on what you have gone through with different eyes and perspective, and you understand that a little bit better now. Could you tell us a little bit more about that, and how is that for you being on the other side in comparison to how you were before? How do you feel physically and mentally at this point now that you can see things differently?
Much lighter, very light. I think it was just, you could almost feel when you're not well, when you're going through depression, the whatever factors there are that are causing it, they almost are very like, they're like suffocating you. They're kind of either suffocated, you're feeling very sense of unease. I still remember going to work on the tube every day. I would constantly be listening to chants, to just, and that was my only way to kind of keep my sanity. Is like, if I listen to chants, I think I'll be okay. But there's just constantly like, it's just so different. Relief, my heart is not pounding anymore all the time. So that definitely is different. Physically, the one thing thankfully I carried on doing even during my depression is not as much as I would like, is physical exercise. But I think now you ask me how physically I feel different. Like, I physically feel different, that I'm able to do exercise like in a better way, because I think I feel that much more lighter. Um, yeah, I think this constant sense of my heart not pounding. Like, it was pounding for 2 years, I think, and then it stopped, because it didn't stop. It's slowly I started feeling that it's not pounding as much. Um, that feeling that you get before you're giving a presentation at work, right?
Right, yeah.
But that feeling doesn't go, and that feeling is just constant, and it's like, and then on top of that, there is an actual work presentation as well. So you have that base level heartache, and then on top of your base level heartache, you have the work. Pardon my French. You've got to go to your work issue, and then it's like, now it's just my work issues that are giving me heartache. So it's just refreshing to live a normal person's life, like, where my issues are presentation at work, my issues are, I don't know, my food delivery has not come on time.
Mhm.
It's fantastic. The other biggest change for me is almost that sense of self and sense of confidence. Anyone who's gone through therapy, they know they start with the values exercise. You have to identify your values, and then um, and for me, like, one of my biggest value at the time, and it still is a sense of self-awareness. But then what I did was, and I can show you what I, to prepare for this conversation, I had actually put together, in my journal where I write, I can't find it now, like a diagram. So in 2020, this is how I live. I write everything in diagram. I'll describe it if I can't find it. Yeah, there you go. So I said 2018, I don't know if you can see it. I should probably turn on my light. Was the year of self-awareness. 2019 is going to be the year of self-belief. So all I want you to see is the little step word. And then 2020 is going to be the year of self-growth. So, I mean, this kind of will answer your question, like, where do you see yourself today versus 2018, 2017, when it hit me? So I can very easily see now, because I'm in the right frame of mind, I am well, that I can actually put my energy towards growth, towards giving back. When you don't have any of that energy left, then you can't give back to the society. I can't sit on this podcast. I can't help anyone else. So this is the year why I'm able to do, things around self-growth. Last year for me was about self-belief, was everything that I had learned in 2018. Like, 2018 was self-awareness. I had learned what I'm all about, what makes up my body, my mind. And then 2019 was me to train myself to have belief in what makes up my body and my mind. So 2018 was, I call it discovery. 2019 was actually now learning that discovery, like consolidating it. And 2020 for me, if coronavirus had not hit, I was telling myself I probably would have become prime minister, because it was my year of self-growth. But But that's the difference, It's like when you're well, when you're not depressed,
Mm.
you actually can focus on things like growth, learning, giving back. When you're in the down with the dumps, you can't help anyone else. You
Yeah,
can't,
I cannot agree with that more. It's like, again, we were talking about that weight on your shoulders that's dragging you down. And now that it doesn't exist, then you feel like you have unlocked a new level in life and you can actually go for the things that you always wanted to achieve and
exactly.
they are easier to achieve. So it's kind of like, we were being our own worst enemies.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
it was a process, a long process where we didn't know that we were doing that to ourselves.
yeah,
So now we are aware of this and we can do the work on ourselves to improve ourselves and their life and experiences around each other.
exactly.
Yeah. Um, you talked about 2018, 2019, 2020 on your diagram. Thank you. Was that a plan that you decided to do after you understood what was going on in your life, or you did that from the beginning? At what stage you decided I need to have this structure?
This structure is a retrospective structure. So this is the structure I discovered when I was fine. So this is what happened to me. This is almost a report. In terms of planning, going through depression, my sort of tactic was very short-term planning. Those are not in diagrams. Those are more like bullet points. Like this is what I'll do in the next 2 months, because my goal was, for me at the time, is I needed to become citizen. Like that was like I was so close, like of the United Kingdom. I was like, that's what I need to focus on. I need to get citizenship. The moment I get that level of freedom, that's when I will be able to be my full self. I will have no pressure of or no sense of lack of security. So dealing with depression, my little plans were exactly like, okay, in the next 6 months, I need to make sure that all my paperwork is in place. I get through that. Um, oh, one of the many things that affected me in 2017, I also changed jobs like an idiot. So I changed jobs and I was again on probation, right? So
So you were under pressure.
obviously, and I changed. Yeah, so it's like I was on a 6 month kind of. They had to check me out basically whether I'm good enough, and those 6 months were just 6 months ahead of my nationality,
Wow.
and then so I was under such immense pressure. So again, so for me, getting out of so that's why I think when I started with therapy, for me CBT was what was needed, which was which is behavioral theory. So basically, we're looking at um, seeing my actions and understanding how my behavior is impacting my mental health, and therefore kind of just rectifying it. Almost, it was very kind of like um, how should I, corporate mental health solving
Right.
basically.
Yeah.
But then after 1 year, then I my therapist number one went on maternity leave, and I found myself a therapist who would actually doing something else, who was actually applying acceptance and commitment theory and actually applying things like more allowing me to go back into my past and into my youth and all of that kind of stuff.
Mm.
Whereas my first set of therapy was goal oriented therapy. So, how do I keep myself okay enough to get my nationality? How do I keep myself okay enough to kind of go through this first 6 months of my relationship with a new partner? um, those were my little goals. And then with my second set of therapy is when I realized that I can also now start making longer term goals, which is how do I want my life to be in the next 5 years, 10 years. So even being able to make long term goals was not a luxury for me during therapy phase number one, but I allowed myself the luxury of that during therapy phase number two, because I had that basic sense of security that I'm not going anywhere. I'm here and I'm queer. So that was kind of my.
So in phase number one of therapy, did you feel like you were not getting the help that you needed, or you were okay with it because that's all you knew, because that was your first session of therapist?
No, I was comfortable. It was a decision that we made together with my therapist that actually this is going to be goal oriented because I was like, Christina, all I need is my citizenship. All I need is for this relationship to work out, for my partner to understand me. That's all I need from you. I don't need you to make me understand. So
So
again, I had to break my own barriers because that's how I've operated my entire life. Like I've operated my life on like hard deadlines and like I need to get my next promotion the next 6 months. That's how I treat a therapy. So she was very sweet. She was like, Addy, it doesn't work like this, but okay, we'll work around what you want.
I always
So
think like therapists could be like a double-edged sword, because they don't tell you no at the beginning. They let you do the work until you find yourself, and then you end up doing what they thought you were gonna, what they thought you were supposed to do from the very beginning.
yeah,
But
yeah,
what that
exactly.
meant is that you were not ready at that point, and you had to go through all of that to understand that then you needed the second phase, as you call it, of your therapy, and then focus a lot more in long-term goals.
Exactly. And my second phase really did help me. Like that's where I truly understood things. Like I'm not saying the first was not useful. It was perfect for that time. That's what I needed. If I got my second type, if my first therapist got me to go back into my youth, I would have had a complete break, like even worse breakdown. Like I feel like because that's when I was not prepared to deal with those truths of my life. But during my second phase is when I was able to confront very harsh truths about my relationship with my mother, um, very harsh truths about, um, you know, my relationship with my roots. But those were the kind of things we could uncover only because that's when I allowed myself the time and actually went back went into my psyche almost. It felt a bit like hypnosis, but it wasn't. But it was more, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Um, Going back to your relationship with your mom, I assume she doesn't know, right?
She knows. So I did come out to them, my mom and dad, back in last year. So it's been 1 year. They don't know about my partner. They don't know about him yet, but they do. I came out to them. And it didn't go as expected. I mean, I say it didn't go as expected. I was just being a hopeful
Okay.
son, and I was just hoping things will be fine. But yeah, so she knows, and she's not well. She hasn't been. She went into a sense of depression as well. But I could deal with that because I knew what she's going through.
Hmm.
Um, and that's why the second phase of therapy also helped because I was dealing with a strong sense of rejection from the one person I held the most important in my life. So to deal with that sense of rejection was something that I did not know how to do, but I was doing that during my second phase. So I'm quite thankful for that phase of therapy as well.
So at this point, you can say that you're no longer dependent on those feelings, you know, on those feelings from
Yeah,
your parents.
I I dip in and out. No, definitely not. So there's a very strong sense of self. There's a very strong sense of like self belief and self growth and all of that, which allows me to not be dependent on them at all. But as I said, the biggest truth that came out during my second session of therapy was my sense of responsibility towards my mum's life,
Mm-hmm.
which is quite deep, and I think it's quite dark as well, because it kind of like as a little child, I always took on that responsibility of being that one person for her,
Yeah.
uh, which
Are you the only
I'm
son?
the only
Only
child.
child?
Like she has no other children. So I think that kind of led to obviously that additional burden, I'd like to say, because it is burden, and that's what I've discovered. And it's not that she was a horrible person who was putting the burden on me. The It's just life had that plan, that construct of our relationship was such that it just worked because I was carrying that burden.
Yeah.
Um, so just taking that responsibility for her. So I think I am totally independent. To answer your question, totally independent. Do not feel a sense of kind of their influence in my life, but that sense of responsibility or that sense of almost guilt of
Mm-hmm.
leaving my mum alone is very, it's so strong. It comes in and out. So I dip in and out of it. So it's hard to train myself to not feel responsible for her ill health, because she doesn't say directly to me that you're responsible for my ill health, but the relationship is so weirdly toxic, weirdly nice toxic. I don't even know what it is. It is something that makes you feel responsible.
You were talking about your own self-worth earlier, so I was wondering if it was around that time when you found yourself and your self-worth and you knew your own value, that you actually learned to separate from those feelings and you didn't feel as guilty. If so, is that the case? And if not, then what do you do when you go in and out of these stages? You say sometimes you feel guilty, sometimes you don't.
Um, Definitely. So I think coming out, by nature of coming out, allowed me to feel, I wouldn't say feel less responsible for her, but it made me, it allowed me to feel more responsible for me. That's what it did. So I ended up focusing more on me, focusing what I needed at the time, focusing on what I needed to do. So prioritizing myself fully and fully. That's what it did. And that allowed me to somehow kind of deprioritize her responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
But um, but only I've only just clocked it, and I can say it like this only recently, as of 1 year ago. So I think being able to have that almost glass shattering moment, that actually all this while, the reason why I feel this way and I feel completely a sense of rejection, I'm kind of frustrated by her not understanding me after coming out to her, and being totally vulnerable with her and telling her, like, and showing her courage. Why she It's because like I had to unpack all of that, and I only understood in my second phase of therapy that actually it's because of that sense of responsibility. um, so again, retrospectively speaking, looking back, I think that sense of responsibility got reduced after 2017, during 2018, and during the front end of 2019, because I was focusing on myself. But it's only in 2019 that I actually put a finger to it and actually said, oh, this is why I've been feeling this, like this part of me is completely, because my relationship with my mom is completely like lopsided. It's fucked. Like it's like what do I do? And that to kind of like completely extract myself off from the responsibility of that. That's when I actively started doing it as of 1 year ago.
Right.
And I dip in and out of it. Yeah, it's very practical stuff. Every time I find myself in that, I literally have to just shake my head and be like, can't deal with it right now, because there's nothing I can do about it. Just go back to that kind of age old saying, like, give me the courage of things that I can change, something the not change, and the wisdom to find the difference between the two.
That's
So
right.
I can't change her conditioning. So I think I find, like, every time I'm feeling a sense of guilt or responsibility, is because I'm like, I'm caught in that feeling of, like seeking validation from her. Then I have to just remind myself that, somehow feel serene enough to accept her conditioning, that, that's how she is. And sometimes I'll listen to some chants again. Like I'll start listening to some, like some prayers, and I'll be like, okay, then I'll feel better. But I just have to literally do something physical, to get out of it.
I mean, that is a good tip. Some people find something physical to, and they get attached to that to kind of pull them back to the ground, and to help them stay there. And I do that as well. I find something physical and then I grab it. If I'm going to do a presentation or something in front of people, like you mentioned earlier, it's impossible to get rid of that fear,
Yeah.
but you do the work to feel better. I don't think that's ever going to go away. We are humans, so we're meant to feel fear in those moments. Otherwise, it would be weird if you didn't. something might be wrong in your head if you didn't.
Yeah.
So it is good to feel those nerves. I think those are the ones that give you that adrenaline kick to actually open your mouth and give that presentation and do a great job. So yeah, finding something physical is a really great tip for people. Um,
My best friend had this tip.
yeah,
Well, he said to me at the time, I didn't practice it. I wish I maybe he used to say that because my ex-partner, who's also my best friend now, it's a beautiful relationship. He basically also came out a few years before me, so he's a more courageous man. I look up to him, um, so, and he came out and he's had an equally horrible journey with his parents, right?
is he
So
from India as well?
yeah, he's from India, a different part of India. So he's had a completely horrible journey himself, and he used to say that every time for him, like for me, I also feared for my life. So I'll tell, like we can talk about this for maybe in a bit. Where after I came out, I had to actually bring my mom and dad over here to to London to stay with us. We had to ship him out for 3 weeks, remove all evidence of his existence into our house.
Oh wow.
That's the extent to which I feel a sense of responsibility, because my mom dipped into such heavy depression, and I was like, right, we need to do something about it. I don't want to come to India, and this is how difficult the situation was. I didn't want to go to India because I thought my dad would kill me. So, and therefore I wanted to be in my safe space. The reason why I also came out to my mom and dad together is because if I only came out to my mom, I didn't want her to carry the load of knowing this truth and actually messing up her marriage with her husband.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of responsibility that I was carrying. And that's why the 2019 therapy really helped me understand the extent to which I was carrying her marriage on my shoulder. I was carrying her life on my shoulder. I was carrying, her self-esteem in front of my father on my shoulder. I digress. The reason why I said this because my best friend also used to have these kind of really crazy arguments, but he never feared for his life. So his family is more progressive in that, like his dad won't kill him. So he used to go back home, have these horrible arguments, and he used to say every time we used to have a really difficult argument, I would just go hook up. That was his physical. Like that was my only way to feel a sense of validation. Like
Right.
he would just
Really tricky. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it sounds like it is funny. He used to say like I used to just go have sex. I used to be like fuck it, I don't need this. I'm gonna have sex. But it's that. But that's the extent to which your parental validation is pushing you because you're like I need to do something to feel worthy again. So I found that it's quite a useful tip actually. Like I feel like dealing with stuff if you're really going through a difficult time, just
I
open
mean,
an app
sex
and
is good, you know, whether you are in that situation or not, and you enjoy it. Why not? I won't say no. I won't, oppose to that. But each to their own, as they say. Everybody deals with their own situations in ways that they think could be beneficial, and it might be the right thing, they might not be the right thing, but in the end, hopefully, again, we use that vulnerability to push through, as we mentioned at the beginning, to actually know what we're doing. Is this going to help me or not? So hopefully, you will feel empowered to recognize those moments. Yeah. So let's wrap it up.
yeah.
Would you tell me in a few sentences then what would you advise for the people listening that might be going through a similar situation as you did, mental health, getting support, being vulnerable, coming out to your parents, getting a new job? As we said, it was a lot happening in that short period of time. But I'm sure some people might identify with your situation. We all go through similar things when we want to come out. And some people still in the closet, and that's a decision, that's fine. But what advice would you give to people at this point?
I would first of all hope that no one has to experience these 10 things hitting them at the same time. But if even two things hit them out of this, I think the one advice I would give and is to genuinely start with one person to tell something. And it's quite common advice, but start with that one person. It could be your best friend, it could be a close friend, it could be a colleague who you trust at work. Someone, maybe if you feel that you're going to be judged, find someone in another department at work. Just tell someone that you're feeling not right. You may not even have the words, but as long as you say you're not feeling well or you're not feeling right, and they will ask you what happened, and they'll start assessing you physically, but you can just say, I'm not feeling well from inside. And I think that's enough for some people to understand that something's wrong with you. So I would say definitely find that one person at work or your best friend. If you have access to, a mental health support at work or outside through private practice or, through the NHS, definitely access that. Because, what I want people to know that this is an actual thing. And I know everyone's been talking about it these days, but this is an actual illness. It needs support. It needs a professional to help you out. Your loved ones. My biggest learning was, expectations. I would expect my partner to sort my life out, but it's not possible. He's not qualified to do it. And that actually put so much pressure on my relationship. It messed up my relationship. So
it is good support, but they can only go so far.
Exactly. And it's you're not, because for me, not only was it to overcome the weakness, but it was also kind of really, if my partner's not going to support me, then what's the point of them in my life? That's how strong, you start feeling. So I think that's what I want people to know, is also not expect so much. So therefore, the professional help is important. So, your colleague will help you, listen, hear you out. But the next step is professional help, if you can, and there are online resources available that people can access. And then the final thing I would say, find the one thing that actually brings you back a sense of normalcy. For me, it's journaling, writing my thoughts, because there's so much in my head, it's a spaghetti head all the time. So it's writing my thoughts.
I haven't heard that before, spaghetti head.
It's proper spaghetti head, or my therapist used to call it monkey brain. So I used to journal a lot. So find that one thing that helps you release. It could be, I don't know, listening to music, like my ex-partner, having sex. Find that one thing that actually gives you that release. For me, it's journaling. Journaling really does help. For some people, it may not work, but for me now, it's data. I have data worth 2 years. I can go back to it all the time and see, and then almost really track my growth.
You have been very disciplined with your structure, and it feels like you're onto something, something good, something better. So I do admire you for that, for actually having that discipline to push through and to carry through your journey and collecting all this data and working on yourself. So yes, I do admire you for that, for actually putting yourself first, because we know that we have to look after ourselves first to be able to help the others. Otherwise, we're not going to be doing a good job on ourselves, and we're not going to be doing a good job on others. So selfish as it sounds, ourselves first. So there you go. Finding somebody that you can confine your thoughts and your words first, and then finding some sort of professional support. And lastly, finding that outlet that can help you release some of that steam somehow, in your case, journalism. So, Adi, is there anything else you want to add?
No, that's it. I think I've really enjoyed speaking with you. I didn't know what I was getting myself into, but I really wanted to, as I said, I'm reaching a point where I want to connect with, people in my community, feel a sense of connection with people. I can give back. So I think, thank you firstly for giving me the opportunity to say all of, I talk so much, but thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk. That's all I want to add, really. It's a different experience, to sit here to talk to you. And I've quite enjoyed it, really enjoyed it, actually.
Yeah, now we're doing everything online, which is a good thing because you can reach people all over the world. But it is obviously we're missing that human part of that connection of being physical with someone else. But we're not going to be in this situation forever. And hopefully we'll be back to the new normal in brackets the sooner or later. So thank you, Adi. Thank you very much for your time, for your thoughts, for opening up and telling your story. And hopefully for the one listening at home, this has resonated somehow with you and it has been of help somehow. So thank you. Thank you for listening. And if you have any questions or want to stay in touch, you can find me on Instagram at My Queer Family Podcast. Until next time.